Good morning, students. Here in this video, I will explain different types of ignition systems or types of ignition systems. Okay. So, what are the different types of ignition system? Basically, conventional ignition systems are two types. Conventionally uh, means so whatever we can say that traditionally whatever they are using, those are having two types. First one is the battery or coil ignition system and magneto ignition system. Okay, first one is the battery or coil ignition system. So here you have figure, okay, battery or coil ignition system, schematic diagram of or battery ignition system. Okay, so it requires essential parts. Those are battery, the capacitor is required, and contact batteries are there. Primary winding is there. Secondary winding is there. Okay, so secondary secondary winding is there. You may observe here. Contact breaker operating cam is there. Here you may observe capacitor is required. Okay, distributor contacts you are having, and spark plug is required here. These are the spark plug. So likewise we are having diagram, and now what are the so those whatever the essential part which are there in that diagram, I will explain those, or we can say that construction of coil ignition system or a battery ignition system. Okay, figure shows this figure shows the line diagram of battery ignition system. This is the line diagram of battery ignition system for a 4-cylinder petrol engine. It mainly consists of 6 or a 12-volt battery. So here you are having battery. So this is what it is. You are having 6 or a 12-volt battery, ammeter, ignition switch, auto transformer, contact breaker, already I shown in the diagram, capacitor, distributor rotor, distributor contact point, spark plug, etc. Okay, so this is the spark plug, capacitor you are having, okay, secondary winding, distributor contact, primary winding, ignition switch is required, ammeter is required. So those are all there were in this diagram already shown. The 4-stroke petrol engine, here there are four plugs also is there. Here you may observe these are the 4 plugs, and the contact breaker cam has 4 corners. Contact breaker for here you may observe that one, what it is, contact breaker operating cam. So these are the contact breaker operating cam. Four corners. Okay, the ignition system is divided into 2 circuits. So here we are having 2 circuits, primary circuit and secondary circuit. This is the, we can say, this is nothing but primary winding, we are having secondary windings. So likewise we need 2 circuits. Primary circuit, in the primary circuit what happens, it consists of 6 or a 12-volt battery, ammeter, ignition switch, primary winding. It has 200 to 300 terms of 20 Sharp's wire gauge or a SWG gauge wire, contact breaker and capacitor. These are all already shown here. And secondary circuit, it consists of secondary winding. Winding consists of about 21,000 terms of 40 SWG gauge wire, bottom end of which is connected to the bottom end of the primary, and top end of the secondary winding is connected to the center of distributor rotor rotates and make contact with contact point and are connected to the spark plug, which are fitted in cylinder head. Okay, working when the ignition switch is closed, how it works. We'll see how it working procedure of this particular ignition system. When the ignition switch is closed, the engine is cranked. As soon as the contact breaker closes, a low voltage current will be flow through the primary winding. It is also be noted that contact breaker cam opens and closes the circuit 4 times for the 4 cylinder in one revolution. When the contact breaker opens the magnetic field begins to collapse. Because of this, the collapsing magnetic field current will be induced in the secondary winding, and because of more turns at, we can say, 21,000 turns of secondary, the voltage goes into 28,000 to 30,000 volt. The high voltage current is brought to the center of the distributor rotates and supplies this high voltage current to the proper spark plug depending upon the engine fire order. When the high voltage current jumps the spark plug gap, the produces the spark and charge is ignited. Combustion starts. Products of combustion expand and produce power. So likewise, what happens, the second, what we can say that this battery ignition system will be work. And now second conventional method, that is magneto ignition system. You are having diagram here, magneto ignition system. This is the schematic diagram of magnetic ignition system. Here it is also consist of what it is: contact breaker is there, capacitor is there, ignition switch is there. Here rotating magnet is required, special part, and again spark plugs. However, it is there in the previous diagram. And primary winding and secondary winding. Here we need to use primary winding and secondary winding. In previous type, primary circuit and secondary circuit we used, and distributor contact points also it is there. Here you may observe distributor contact points and distributor rotor. So here we are having distributor rotor. So likewise, different parts where it is required and which are there in that diagram. So now how it is constructed and how it will be worked, so I will explain now. In this case, magneto will be produce and supply the required current to the primary winding. So here the magneto will be produce the required current and it will be supplied to the primary winding. In this case, as shown, we can have rotating magneto with fixed coil or a rotating coil with fixed magneto for producing and supplying current to primary. Remaining arrangement is same as that of battery ignition system. So whatever the arrangement it is there in the battery uh, ignition system, same arrangement will be there. So likewise, and so working procedure is also almost similar to that type of what it is battery ignition system here. And now the one more important type of ignition system we are having here is the electronic ignition system. The electronic ignition system having again 4 types, that is capacitance, discharge ignition system, and transtori transtorized system, piezoelectric ignition system, the taxco ignition system. So likewise, 4 types we are having. One by one we will see how it is there. Now the capacitance discharge ignition system. For the capacitance discharge ignition system, we have diagram, that is the capacitance discharge ignition system. So now what are the different essential parts are required for this particular ignition system? We will see. One is ignition switch. Battery is very important, which is there. AC to DC converter, and charging resistance. Here you may observe charging resistance, the capacitance or capacitors, and one more device here, SCR winding device. So this one is the SCR winding device. Again, uh, this is the connection towards the spark plug. So likewise, we are having what is different parts of the capacitance discharge ignition system. And now we will see the construction and working of this capacitance discharge ignition system. It mainly consists of 6 to 12 volt battery, shown already here, sorry, and ignition switch, DC to ignition switch, DC to AC converter, DC to AC converter it is actually, and charge resistance, tank capacitor, silicon controlled rectifier, SCR triggering device, step up transformer, spark plugs. 6 to 12 volt battery is connected to the DC to AC converter. That is now the power circuit through the ignition switch, which is designed to give or increase the voltage to 250 to 350 volt. This high voltage is used to charge the tank capacitor or condenser to this voltage through the charging resistor. The charging resistance is also designed that it controls the required current in the SCR or a secondary controlled reflector. The depending upon the engine firing order, whenever the SCR triggering device sends the pulse, then the current flowing through primary winding is stopped and the magnetic field begins to collapse. The collapsing magnetic field will induce the step up high voltage current in the secondary, which while jumping the spark plug cap produces the spark and the charge of air fuel mixture is ignited. So likewise, the capacitance discharge ignition system will work. And now the one more is the piezoelectric ignition system. The development of synthetic piezoelectric material produces about 22 kV by mechanical loading of the small crystal, resulted in the some ignition system for the single cylinder engine, but due to the difficulties of high mechanical loading, need of order of 500 kg timely control the ability to produce sufficient voltage, these systems having not been able to come up. Now Taxco ignition system, due to the increased emphasis the exhaust emission control, there has been a sudden interest in the exhaust gas recirculation system and then fuel air mixture to avoid the problem of burning of lean mixture. The Texaco ignition system has been developed. This provides a spark of controlled duration, which means the sparking duration in crank angle degrees can be made constant at all engine speeds. It is a AC system. This system consists of their basic unit, a power unit, control unit, and distributor sensor. This system can give stable ignition of up to air fuel ratios as high as 24. Likewise, the piezoelectric ignition system and Taxaco ignition system will work. So, this is about the ignition types of ignition system. So likewise, so ignition types of ignition system. Okay, thank you.